All right, welcome back. Great show. We have a wonderful guest with us tonight. As you well know, it's Michael Tsarion, and he's going to be with us for the entire 2 hours. Oh my goodness, how great is that? Now, for those of you who would want to check it out, please go to his website. That's michaeltsarion.com. You can get to that link right from the front page of my website. Let's see, he also wants me to mention the full title of his new DVD is, I think it's Architects of Control, Mass Control, and the Future of Mankind. Totally awesome. Don't forget to please join us in the chat room. You can get to that link right from my front page. It'll say chat room. It's right there on the right side. Please come in and join us. Get your questions answered there. Please converse about tonight's conversation, because I assure you it's going to be full of a lot of information. And another one of his DVDs we're going to be talking about is also called Irish Origins of Civilization. But without further ado, let's welcome Michael to the show. Hi, Michael.
Hi there. How you doing? Nice to be with you, Rebecca. Thanks for inviting me.
It is wonderful to have you on. And where are you at again? I forget.
Say that again. You broke up.
Where are you at again? Where are you at?
I'm in Britain right now.
You're in Britain. Okay, yep. So it's in the middle of the morning for you almost.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to say thank you for staying up or getting up, whatever the case may be, to join us here on the Journeys with Rebecca radio show. I'm very honored to have you here as well, and so is everyone else.
Oh, it's great to hear that. It's been, it's good to be on your show. Good.
Well, first of all, let's talk a little bit about some of the new DVDs, because the second DVD, the one that's the more auspicious, or certainly a complicated one, that's going to lead us into further conversation. So if you talk about some of the new projects that you have going on and with the DVDs, and we'll go from there. That'd be awesome.
Well, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I did the books this year, last November. We released the first edition of the Irish Origins of Civilization, which is a double set, and then we had to postpone projects because it was my first conference in Britain came up in May, which was at Liverpool, and it was just great to be there and do that. It was, pretty auspicious for me. And I say no to a lot of, conferences and things like that when I don't trust the integrity of the people. But, the people who put that on are just excellent. People who had worked for David Icke, and they had a good history and a good reputation. So it was real fun to be over there with everybody and do that talk. And it was mostly about the Irish origins. But then when we finished that somewhere in June and July, then I start working on the DVD companion to Irish Origins of Civilization, and that's like a 13-hour series.
Wow.
That'll be out. That's coming out in about 2 to 3 weeks. And then for the last year, though, we've been working on a series of documentary films called The Architects of Control. People can check out the first one on architectsofcontrol.com. And that one is also going to be coming out in a very short time. We're putting the finishing touches to it now. And that title, as you rightly said, is Mass Control, the Future of Mankind. It's more a follow-on from my work on 2012, but it's a little bit deeper, look at what's waiting for us tomorrow with the global village and with the rise of, technology and genetics and stuff like that. What people have got to remember is, you see, that a lot of people are familiar with my work. They're familiar through Google and YouTube and watching a lot of the freebies we put up. And this is, fine. This is great. Well, I've been doing that since, about 5-6 years ago. We've been putting up stuff on Google and YouTube. But the thing that they also have to remember is that that's not a whole of somebody's work. What you're getting there is really excerpts. You're getting maybe an hour talk that was filmed somewhere, or a 2-hour talk that was filmed somewhere, or you're getting something that a lot of other people have put up, and that's all permitted. I don't have a problem with that, but also people just need to focus on the fact that that's not the whole gig. They need to come to the meat. They need to pick up the books and the official DVDs, because that's where we really go to town on the work. There's a certain limitation. If you're just looking at the Google and YouTube uploads, you're going to get they're like appetizers. You're going to get a feeling of what we're doing, but not necessarily the whole the whole scope of what we're doing. So it's always important for people to come to my websites, and check out what I'm doing, and not totally go by these sort of shorter uploads,
Well, and that being said, I would love to know when the DVD's coming out on the Architects of Control, because I'd certainly like to have that for my library.
Yeah. We'll definitely get you one.
Good, absolutely, because I know that you've been working quite a lot with doing these documentaries, these films, and all of this, and it just comes at a hugely important time. I think the timing is what's probably the most auspicious, at least for me, Michael, as I look at this for you. It's like, wow, couldn't come at a better time due to all the circumstances going on in the world today, and that's kind of what this whole show is about. This conversation is about the state of the world, and all the work that people such as yourself, David Icke, and many others that have vision and have done the research and have followed their own intuition, if you will, their deeper selves. You've dedicated your life to seeking the truth, and you are dedicated to getting that truth out. And now more than ever, with such deceptions in our media, in our entire world, even the way we do business, the deception, it's absolutely imperative for people to get the truth, at least to have the other side of the story, if you will, or the other side of the coin.
You're totally right there, and that's why I said what I did just a minute ago. And people sometimes the downside is that when they just think that they can pop into seeing shorter versions, which are basically just promos, or they're just sort of appetizers. They've got sometimes the downside of that is that people think, okay, that's the A to Z, the alpha and omega of what these people have to say, and I definitely have to refute that, because you see, this is a very, very deep and complex and labyrinthine area of study. It constitutes an entire alternative revisionist view of almost every subject that you could think of, stretching from science into the arts and humanities. You see, so just as much as a normal school or university or college will demand you to take a curriculum, to take a course, to really, do your homework, it's no different in this area. It's not infotainment, it's not entertainment, it's not something to do of an evening when you got nothing else to do. This is sometimes sort of a feeling that you get that it's not being taken seriously by a lot of people. And then, of course, there's a lot of label reading in general in society, and I'm against that. And this subject, and I said this even live, I said this at the beginning introduction of my Origins of Evil talk, which is, people can see that free online, the Origins of Evil. I say that in the first introduction. In the first 10 minutes, I tell that to people that, look, person needs to be very eloquent when they deal with these subject matter, and they need to get their arms around all of the information and do a sifting process. And, of course, a lot of people know what I'm saying. They know that even with the 9/11 issue, that there's been a lot of stuff put out there, but anybody who's intelligent knows to take the time to sift through the information, to use your critical analyses and so on, and then, and sort of do your own research so that you are familiar with the facts, as opposed to what's just, going around on the grapevine. And it's the same thing when it comes to history or the deeper hidden areas of politics. Basically what I'm saying is that this subject that we're into demands a lot of attention, a lot of research. Label reading will not cut it. Just watching a couple of hour-long or, a few minutes-long uploads is also not going to cut it. This is something that must take a lot of passion, not just on the side of people like myself who create this information, but also on the side of the people who come to it from the art side. They also need to really dig deep, ask questions, find out more, follow up the research material that we've made available, follow up the sources and references that we've made available, so that the whole of this, sort of subject can be clear in their minds. I always say so many times that we're basically on safari hunting a tiger, a very elusive predator, and therefore you need to be really armed up, and you need to have the sort of the wits and the sixth sense of the hunter, because what we're dealing with here is very cunning at hiding its tracks, and it doesn't want to be caught, it doesn't want to be investigated, and so it's a very difficult and complex area,
Oh, and I so agree with all that, because as you stated, when I've watched your videos and things like that and your talks, really all it did was just, as you said, it just kind of whets your appetite and makes you want to go further into it and really, really, really get into all of it. That's one of the things that you do in your books, is that you cover a topic thoroughly enough to where people have not only what's going on with what you're trying to say, but also where it comes from, what you've done, how you come about this, where do
That's right. It's like a forensic type investigation. People will know that, you're hunting the criminal, but there's also a lot of sort of, obstruction. There's a lot of other factors out there. There's a lot of other clues out there. It takes time. It takes sort of intelligence. It takes a lot of tools in the toolkit because we're dealing here with a universal predator, something that is very dark, very elusive, and it requires a lot of attention. And, that's why we put out these books. That's why we put out these books. My work is very much like a manual for those people who are on the trail of this kind of, situation, this kind of conspiracy. They're not entertainment books, they're not fiction. They're very much written in earnest. I always try to say that in the introductions of my work, that, I've been driven to, go down this road. It's not an easy road, but again, at the same time, I think what we're, like you said in the introduction of this show, we're in a different time than we were in the 80s and the 70s and the 60s. We're in a different era in which the truth is going to come out one way or the other. So you're either going to have to get onto that and have the sort of hard wiring to accept these facts as they come down. You're going to have to be able to accept these downloads of truth and realize that that's an incredible miracle that's taking place, even though it may, sort of rub you up the wrong way in the beginning, or it may cause a certain threat in the beginning. But you have to get with it, I mean, Schopenhauer said this, a century ago, that, first truth is resisted, and then finally, it's accepted. And so what we're asking, our audience to do right now is to be as open-minded as they can, not to just trust us, not to trust what we're saying, but to investigate it for themselves and follow up these leads, and to think of it as a sort of an investigation. Because the world that we knew, the world that our grandparents knew, the world that our fathers knew, is ending. We're in the situation of the countdown to the extinction of one phase of humanity. And it may be that we're not entering into a second, phase of humanity in any way that we have known before. This is what, my work is somewhat goes into, about what are we heading down towards, and maybe we can talk about that later. But all that people have to realize now is it sort of answers a lot of what you're seeing in the world, what you're seeing in the media, what you're seeing coming down, what you're seeing in your neighborhoods, the changing of the laws, the changing of the constitutional rights, and the shifting over to those rights becoming privileges, the changes in what we are receiving from on high, the different in status now. Are people really citizens of a free country, or are they, serfs in a new feudal global village? These kinds of things. So people are seeing all of this, and they have to realize that what is happening is there's a winding down, a closure taking place. And this is the corroboration of this can be seen in astrology, but the corroboration can also be seen right on the street level. That one old way of living, one old way of having laws to protect us, one old way of community existing, one old way of traditions that we've grown up with, one whole way of moral sensibilities. All of that is winding down because our world is being ruled by psychopaths who are highly, put out by the things that we would normally take for granted. The human connections, the sense of, belief system, world, and love, and humanity and virtue. All of these things are intensely disliked by the people who are ruling us. And my message is always about the fact, well, we're putting those people in place. We're also the people who can take them out of place when we know what we're doing, But in short, you see, we're entering into a sort of a closure, a kind of a winding down of one phase of humanity, and there's going to be a shift into another one, and it's happening right now.
And I absolutely, positively, 150% am behind everything that you just said. And before we go on a break, the last thing that I'd like to mention here is, for those of you who have ever woke up in your day and said, there's something terribly wrong in this world, why does nothing feel right? These people like Michael Tsarion are the people that you need to start studying as well as anybody else. Like he said, don't take just his word for it, do the research yourself. But that being said, we have a whole lot more to cover, Michael. We're going to take a short break, and we come back. We're going to be coming back with more of Michael Tsarion right here on Journeys with Rebecca. Stay with us, please. All right, welcome back, and we are here with a very auspicious guest, Mr. Michael Tsarion. And we covered an awful lot of ground just in that first segment, Michael. It's just been pretty totally awesome with that. I did want to remind the listeners out there, please join me in the chat room. There is a monitor there, so if you do have some questions we will get to those. We'll also be giving out a phone number for those of you who might want to ask a little bit later in the show some questions of Michael while we have him here, and take advantage of that to ask your questions that would be pertinent to the show. So that is journeyswithrebecca.com, and right there on the right-hand side of the front page is the listener chat box. Just click on it. There's nothing to do except for just to go in, and you can simply ask your question there. Or if you have an email, you can email us at mailbag@journeyswithrebecca.com. Look forward to it, you guys. Okay, back again. So we've been chatting. I'll just tell everyone we've been chatting back and forth using an instant message you and I have, so that we can communicate during the commercial breaks. And I know there was something that you wanted to talk about that is happening in, I guess it's called the West Memphis 3 court case.
Yeah, that's right. That's why I asked you from where you're broadcasting, because whenever I'm on a show, in Georgia, Arkansas, or down your way in Kansas, or whatever, I always want to mention that over, we're talking about large injustices all the time, and we tend to focus a lot on, the larger scale injustices on a governmental level. But see, let's never forget also that there's, mass incarcerations now all across America. Teachers are underfunded and jails are exploding. American taxpayers, are now being sort of like cajoled behind their backs. Policies have been uncovered that, are making people in America be the funders for development. This is economic and corporate development in Mexico because of this pernicious NAFTA that came in, So American taxpayers are being sort of, thumb screwed into that by Big Brother in order to, people got to find this stuff out. This is a sort of a level of injustice that's going on. We may have the Amero coming in. We do have the CAFTA and the NAFTA being put into place. So people got to realize that whenever, it doesn't matter what kind of talking head that, comes in to be the president of the corporation of the United States of America, and believe me, it's nothing more than a corporation when it comes to what's happening at the White House there. That's why he's only in for 4 years, because that's what a corporate president, that's the time that any corporate president, you see, is in power in a corporation.
Right.
So what you have in the federal government is not something that serves the American people, and I hope that one of the positive things that's coming out of what's happening today is that maybe a lot of American mainstream people are understanding this, because, of course, as things get worse, that also has a power to wake and shake people up enough so that they start to look into these questions of legality in government, and then they start to realize what is going on is just a one-party system controlled from higher up. But when I'm on the southern states, I always want to bring up this question of the West Memphis 3, because this is 3 young men who about 14 years ago were incarcerated, and one of them looks like he's going to be executed very, very soon if something isn't done. So I donate money to their cause. They have a website that's it's West Memphis 3, so that's WM3.org, WM3.org. I hope that people like yourself will carry a little link on your websites, that will navigate people through so they can check this huge in-your-face injustice out there. Why I'm particularly interested in it, Rebecca, if you allow me, is because, you see, it's not just the fact that these guys were illegally arrested and have gone through this total shambles, this unbelievable breach of justice down there in West Memphis. But also, you see, I came upon the subject because I also keep a large file. I have been doing this since about 1980 on satanic ritual type murders and the whole satanic networks that spread throughout the world. And also, this has been officially documented. Many writers have written on this. In recent times, you've had a lot of whistleblowers from within inside the movement come out to talk about this. I mentioned Senator John DeCamp and people like Ted Gunderson, of the FBI. People like this have written on this, have websites on it, have documented it. And, this is a great research of mine as well, to look at the spread of these satanic networks throughout the world. And when you study them and when you find out what they're doing, you also come across the fact that there's an entire smokescreen of denial in front of the fact that these satanic networks exist. So you not only have the problem itself, but you've got the cover-ups, because you have people in government, you have people in local government, you've got mayors and judges and police chiefs and even clergymen and all sorts of people in positions of power who belong to these satanic networks, who are operating behind the normal official churches and so on. And then, of course, what they are programmed to do, and I think this may be true in this case in West Memphis, is that they go around, you see, to try and find the scapegoats. And so these three young men, see, they listened to, rock music, they dressed in black, and by the time the media got hold of these guys, and by the time that they were sort of, seized upon, it became, in fact, one of the inmates, has described their treatment as like a sort of a lynching, that, West Memphis became a sort of like a Salem, in which just because they were interested a little bit in the occult and they were reading, they actually read books, that's all, they were immediately found guilty. The whole town had found them guilty just because they read, just because they're different, just because they're introverted, just because they happen to be interested in mysticism and spirituality. Is this a crime in America today? And this case, it makes one think that, in fact, it is. So, there's my rant for on your show
Oh, I could go off for a couple hours on that myself.
Well, exactly. See, the point being is that it's okay to be focused on the larger, greater, level of corruption, but my work always digs into specific cases when I feel it's worth it, to point people in this direction. I've done this on other shows, and this particular case right down there in Arkansas is a travesty of justice, a monumental one, and it may be larger than we think. It may be larger than we think. This may be happening down there, you see, to cover up a greater crime, crime that we know ties into many of these satanic networks that operate throughout America, throughout the southern states. It's absolutely documented, it's absolutely factual, and sadly, it's not just a case of these real culprits getting away. What happens is that they often cover their tracks by seizing scapegoats. And these three young men, who were in their teens when this happened, who absolutely have there's not an ounce of DNA, corroboration or any actual factual evidence linking them to these horrible, sinister, ritualistic types of crimes that they've been accused of. And I'm telling you now that, they're in serious trouble, so people can donate to their cause to help them pay for their legal counsel, and also just petition the media in that area to, open the case again and to try and get some semblance of justice after, almost coming up to 2 decades now.
Well, and after you brought it up, I absolutely now do remember that. I told you, I said it sounded familiar, but, being that it was that old, I had forgotten about it, truthfully. And interestingly enough that you happen to bring up, old cases, today I get a ton of emails as well as you do, I'm sure. And, some of these things I start reading on. And today in my email box I had 3 separate emails from 3 separate sources about 3 separate incidences that's happening here in the United States where people have been falsely accused, falsely incarcerated, as the case may be. Some were just accused, and one person has actually fled the United States because of prosecution, fear of prosecution, because of something that they just were reporting on that was truth. And interestingly enough, it was in one of the southern states on this particular person I was talking about. So, and I would love to be able to share the information, but at this time I'm not able to do that because obviously that could obviously draw attention to this person again, and I don't certainly want to do that at this point. So all of this is, people really do, many people do really have their head in the sand. They really do believe that all of this is okay, that this is really how the world is supposed to be, in this state of chaos and deception and confusion and keeping people in fear, and that really isn't the grand plan for humanity. However, the more that we all sit back and do nothing and not let our voices be heard and not dig for the truth and not dig for these injustices, shame on us, because we're in effect sentencing our own selves to the same continued way things are going.
Oh yeah, it's very important, and at the same time, you see, people should never feel disempowered.
Right.
People like yourself have started radio shows on this, to get into this whole rabbit hole and chase it down. And so, as I said, it's a sad thing about human beings, but sometimes they do need to have a bit of trauma, before they start to really realize what's valid and what is of importance, and what is, what we've been taking granted for. Sometimes we sort of get into this state where, we just take things for granted and we don't think deeply about anything, not even where the food we're eating comes from, or the toxins that we may be imbibing, or just some of the old values, So it's always good to sort of have a situation in which we reevaluate the things that are in our lives, And see, what's happening now with all of this injustice, it is partly astrological, or at least astrological science sort of gives you a way to look into it. You know, there's the movement of the planet Pluto right now. There's the countdown to 2012 right now. And see, that has both a good and a bad sort of component. It's like a sort of it's like a braid that has many threads. So there's partly, you know, an area of trauma there, an area of exposure, but at the same time, there's also an area of that this exposure is very, very good and very, very needed on all levels. It cuts across all the levels for people to start seeing the injustice in their midst, or any of the other kinds of, you know, content, any of the other kinds of way of living that need to be jettisoned so that people can start anew and be fresh. You know, and I think that in the deepest part of people's psyche, they are crying out for that. You know, so it's, again, it shouldn't always be seen as negative. It should always be seen more as an adventure, you know.
Well, yeah, and really it is. It's not none of this information, and I will repeat this, and I've repeated every show that I have anyone on. This is not about set people in fear. This is about setting people in truth and knowledge, and really righteous indignation is at hand. You know, you were talking about all the things that we just accept. One of the things that really irked me was earlier this year, got a report from the little city I live in about the water content as an example. Mm-hmm. And it showed all the things that are in the water, and of course it rates it according to what the federal government says is okay for us to be drinking. And of course it has all of these pollutants and toxins, but quote unquote it's okay because it's still under government standards, right, of, you know, what is acceptable as far as toxins, you know, in our water supply. And I think to myself, you know, it just so infuriates me. It's like, why would they think that any toxin is okay? You know, I can't wrap my brain around stuff like that. And why doesn't it irritate and infuriate other people that the very water that you're drinking, you know, this whole thing started back in the 60s when they decided to take pure drinking water that came out of the ground and put fluoride in it because it was for dental health for children. Hello?
Yeah, that's right.
Something's wrong with this picture, right?
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
And it's systematically gotten worse and gotten worse and gotten worse, to the point is that every day you and I, if we're drinking water that comes out of our tap, even bathing in it, because, you know, the toxins can seep into the pores, or you brush your teeth, anything.
Well, look at the formulas that they've been creating for children, you know, and look at the poisons they've been putting into the animals that then we, you know, end up getting through the meat and through the cheese and through the milk, and then people are contracting cancers.
Yes, at a rapid rate.
Yeah, you know, all sorts of things. So again, it requires investigation. My message is basically that people should take the law and the rules, not the law into their own hands, but the rules into their own hands, the time into their own hands, to go and check out all of these things, because it's not really going to happen so much where other people are going to, you know, come and save you. It's more about you doing the research, you becoming sort of like a little Sherlock Holmes, to get online, you know, to get on the internet, to check out the material, to go down to the bookstore and research this. And what happens is a lot of people try to, you know, they find out a little bit about some of this stuff, and then they immediately want to go and wake up the rest of humanity. And they do that without first having all the facts, and they do it ineloquently. So, you know, this is the failure. When everybody goes, hey, I've tried to wake people up, you know, Michael, and it doesn't seem to work, and what do you think I'm doing wrong? Mostly it is because you've been too quick. You've hurried too much. You have, and it's all born out of virtue, of course. I mean, the person has actually seen something true, and then they want to go and share it. But they realize that you have to realize that people are massive defenses. The human ego is a massive defenses. And so, you know, you need to be able to present your case in an extremely positive way, in a very eloquent way, and have a lot of facts there, and then also not be attached to the outcome of whether or not people are going to change or not. Just do it in sort of, you know, a very objective way. You just present the information, say, here it is, here's what I have discovered, and now it's up to you, you know. People can get on a blog, it's for free. I mean, the blogs are free, for goodness sake. You know, you can create your own website, you can come on radio, you can put together a little booklet or pamphlet. There's so many ways to go. But the person must do it in an eloquent way, and they have a lot of facts, you know, to back up what they're talking about. Because otherwise you're going to end up coming to face, you know, the people who are not open, or the people like Bill O'Reilly who are just you know, sort of programmed to shout you down. And then, you know, and then of course you get frustrated, and rightly so.
Right, exactly. Well, I think this might be a really good time for us to take a short break. And then when we come back, I'd like to kind of get started on the Architects of Control thing and some of the other stuff. So the rest of you, do not go away. We've got lots more with Michael Tsarion coming right up. All right, welcome back. We are here with Michael Tsarion, futurist, author, and for those of you who have just joined us, we're glad that you did. Michael will be here through the rest of this hour as well as all of next hour, so we're very delighted and honored to have him here on the show. We've got so many more things to cover with everyone tonight. Please join us in the chat room. You can get to that from my website. That's journeyswithrebecca.com. And on the right-hand side is the listener chat. Please join us. Nothing to sign up for or anything like that, so it's all cool. Or you can instant message us at Yahoo. The ID is Journeys with Rebecca, all one word. Michael, welcome back. One of the things is the first time, and for those of you who do not know, it would really be really good. Last year, Michael was with us on the show. He was here talking about his book, Origin or Irish. The Civilizations of Irish Origins. I'm sorry, I lost the train of thought there, Michael.
It's the Irish Origins of Civilization.
Okay, my dyslexia was showing again. I got.
No problem.
And that was just fascinating. The book was even more fascinating because obviously, like we talked about earlier, it was just kind of, a precursor to a much more extraordinary, in-depth information. But we're also here to talk to him tonight, too, about the one project that he's been working on that's been quite lengthy and long in duration, which is Architects of Control. And I'd like for you maybe if you will, before we go on this last break in between the hours, is maybe just to talk a little bit about the Architects of Control. So when we come back, off of the top of the hour break, we will get into some questions and some further conversations on that, and we can also learn where to get the DVD and when it's coming out and all of that.
Sure, yeah. This is a project me and my colleagues have been working on that is pretty much a carry-on from a talk that I did in Los Angeles, I think it was in 2004, and it was called 2012, The Future of Mankind. And then that was filmed by somebody, a friend, and then, he gave me a copy and we put it up on Google. And what do you know? It became one of the, Google's most watched videos.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me.
Well, it certainly surprised me, though, because, first of all, you can't predict that something like that's going to happen where, you're talking about 100 people.
Right.
And we had done the same talk the night before it was Huntington Beach. So, I just walk in to do my thing, and that particular night was lovely because, Jordan Maxwell, Anthony J. Hilder, were in the crowd. They were there. It was good to be amongst friends in Los Angeles. And so I just did the talk, and then, also Ted, who was a good friend who was filming it, he's the owner of Lost Arts Media. And so it was, good to be amongst friends and just to do that particular talk. And then he had filmed it, gave me the disc. I had it uploaded to Google, and then the next thing you know, I think it must have been within 3 months, already, something like 500,000 people had watched it, and then as the months went by, it became one of Google's most watched. But I then was getting lots of emails from people saying, we want to know more about this, we want to know more, do you have another one? Do you have this for sale or something like that, And of course, no, this was just a free upload. But it got me to thinking last year that, okay, people are very interested in this, particularly this whole concept of the postmodern world, which we had talked about in the video. And, that of course it's ridiculous to conceive that anything is going to happen to nature or happen to the universe, after this particular point of prediction, which is what the Maya calendar said, that after 2012, there's not going to be the sense of humanity anymore. They're basically calling that a 0 hour, in which, they have no prediction. They don't see further than that. It's like a sort of a termination point for the whole human race. And so a lot of people have a question about that. They've thought about that. And it tied in with my work. Where I came to it is that it tied in very much with, my studies into psychology, into that we've been on a countdown to extinction for a long time. but it's not so much a countdown to extinction in a social way or a physical or technological way. It's more a countdown to the extinguishment of emotion, of humanity, of virtue, of anything that really constitutes humanity. And so when I, was looking into what these, the Maya prediction was about, and I did a 13-hour-long DVD on it. I mean, I have an actual DVD that we did, in 2006 on this, which is called 2012, Where History Ends. And that is basically the sum up of it, is that, history itself is very likely the end. The history, as we said in before the break there, the idioms, the customs, the traditions, the rites, the kind of motivations that we've known, that our forefathers have known, is fading out. We're moving rapidly into a sort of a technotronic era. We're in the middle of it, and there's a lot of perks, and there's a lot of good things that can come out of it. So a lot of us are not really focusing on the negative side of it. This ties in with, philosophy. It ties in with the message of the psychologists in the past. In fact, if you even go back to the Gnostic Gospels, sort of the Nag Hammadi library and sort of the early proto-Christian groups, they were also warning about this. They were warning about a demiurge. They were warning about a robotic type of situation in which man sacrifices himself, to some very dark forces, and that basically man is nothing. At his lowest level, he's basically a servant. He's an automaton. He's a robotic servant of some very nasty and negative forces that are working. And I believe that this force, this negative force, has already pretty much possessed most of the world leaders. I mean, I look at it as an act of sorcery. These people are not just doing it from, for love of power and money. There's something much darker going on there. It ties into a lot of areas. So we wanted to explore this more, and more than just be doom merchants, because that's what I'm not a doom merchant. I'm not a person who wants to, always paint everything black. But what I wanted to look at was, okay, let's turn it on its head a bit. What is it in human consciousness that causes these kinds of tragic things, to happen in the world? What is it in consciousness that has created the kind of societies in which we live? Because it's not other people that have been creating it outside of ourselves. It's us. We participate in it. We're part of the social hive. So we have to look at those factors, you see. And that's what a philosopher does. A philosopher sits down. He doesn't accuse. He doesn't just point fingers. But he sits down, very much like what Socrates did with his symposium. They sit around and they ask questions about consciousness. They sit down and they ask questions about, humanity and about the Republic and about where we're going. Now, what I see in this world is that a lot of people's attention has been focused purely on political areas. It's almost that's the exclusive realm of action. On top of political, maybe you have some legal sort of insight, and to me that's very paltry. It's not as much as it should be. But you see, over time, people have stopped looking at sort of, the greater human aspects. We don't have conversations about this anymore. We're not talking too much about, in philosophical and psychological terms. And that worries me because we have to. We have to continually remember that behind all the other isms and ologies and all the other things in life, there's psychology, there's the human consciousness. It all roots back to consciousness. And so to leave consciousness at the door is really not good, and doing so puts us at the mercy of the very leaders or misleaders, you see, who are wanting to lead us down the road into this utopia, this sort of cyber purgatory, this postmodern world in which people are so removed and so distant from their own emotions. Now, people who might find this hard to understand, need to go and start studying the demographics, study the statistics of the use of Prozac, you see, and the use of the ADD drugs, the way that our children are being medicated, and look at that, pull back from the canvas and look at why that might be happening. That is to basically, that's the prelude, that's the sort of preparation. They're preparing us for a state in which as soon as any troublesome emotions comes up, and as soon as any sort of life issues come up, instead of working through them like human beings used to do in the past, you go and get the quick fix. And you become then so addicted to the quick fix, and because don't forget that the big fix works. So people will say they do feel better, and so then one becomes addicted to taking the big fix. And this is the society that we're heading into. We're being prepared for something, and it's pretty alarming as to what we might be being prepared for.
And interesting two things. First of all is I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I interviewed a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist he was an elderly gentleman. He was close to 70 at the time, if he wasn't already in his 70s. And he had dedicated his life to psychiatry. And the difference between a psychologist and psychiatrist, for those that may not know, is a psychiatrist can write prescriptions, whereas a psychologist cannot. And this psychiatrist, in all of his 50-some years, I can't remember exactly how long he had actually had been in practice, had never written a prescription for any drug. Instead, this gentleman wrote a book on how to teach people very simple steps on how to learn how to cope with things that we call stress. We use that word in every sentence. I hear it 100 times a day. I'm stressed, I'm stressed. Again, a word that's been overused, overabused, and totally accepted in our society. He gave me facts and figures that children as young as 2 were now being put on attention deficit disorder drugs as well as Prozacs because they were labeled, quote-unquote, hyperactive. So this gentleman really opened up my eyes in regards to the overabuse of, pharmaceuticals. And if people can't see the trend here in the United States, the FDA is okaying so many drugs without really doing any research on what it does to the human body, and people are blindly accepting it. They're blindly taking it. They are doing that. They're self-medicating themselves because it does feel better, but it still doesn't take away whatever the issues are. It never deals with the issues.
Not at all, and that's the plan. People think
Yes.
that's just a mistake or an oversight. That's the plan. There is even now a doctor, some maniac out of Stanford University, who's been very much behind promoting these kinds of drugs for children, who now wants to give it pretty much from the moment of birth. He wants to have the kids on it even before they're diagnosed with ADD, in some pathetic, jive that if we get them on it early, then they won't develop it.
Yeah, that's always good healthy for the body, right?
Right.
And then,
Yeah.
Well,
so my point is that these people are part of these networks. They're
Yes.
part of a network of people who work, behind the official, institutes of education and whatnot. But these are very, very sinister people, and they need to be called out, and they need to be put a stop to, because they have the power and the backing and the finances to actually bring this kind of stuff in. It's reminded me as a very good, people go to Google or YouTube and put in the medicated child. They'll find a very interesting upload there called, it's the medicated child, and, watch that and share it with your friends. It's a very, very important, video that goes into all of this. And there's many books been written on this as well. Another character, while I'm on your show, I'd like to really emphasize, if people haven't heard of him, is John Taylor Gatto. I actually hope you have him as a guest on at some point. John Taylor Gatto, Gatto. He's written a book called the Underground of American Education.
Ah, okay.
And he has a website. Yeah, very important person who shows you. He wrote a book called Dumbing Us Down.
Yes.
He's a very good author, showing you that education systems in this country and in the world are not about learning at all. They're not about learning. They're about dumbing you down. They're about programming you to become a menial in the system that Big Brother has created for you. And anyone who shows actually any true intelligence, they want to actually medicate that person right away. Anybody who shows any sign of actual, independence or independence of thought, or any kind of, genetic or genius, they want to immediately suppress that kind of person. They're looking to create the perfect society full of, indistinguishable, replicated, robotic, artificialized, non-persons is basically what they want. And see, if we project this into the future, we might end up finding, and I'm looking into the whole thing that they're doing with the sequestering of seeds, like Monsanto.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Because everyone's now worried about GMOs and all of this kind of thing. What they have to start looking into now is that what is the plan behind that? Because this genetic manipulation of herbs, plants, and even animals, but just for a moment, let's keep it with the fauna, the flora, just the plants and the herbs. This genetic manipulation goes back even to the time of Babylon and to the time of Sumeria. It's very, very old, and the old records of Sumeria, and there's people who are experts on this, have looked into finding that even some of the old marrows and old vegetables, it looks like they were genetically manipulated in times past. and this ties in with people like myself, our theories about Atlantis and Lemuria. I know it's a big thing for people to swallow, but we've got to understand that a lot of the technologies that we're using today, including cybernetics, including robotics, including genetic science, was known in ancient days once you break through this lie of believing that our history of the world just opened about 7,000 to 10,000 years ago.
Right.
And I'm glad to say, that is being broken through.
It is. With people like you bringing that forward, absolutely.
Well, the interesting thing is, if we fast forward now, we find out that what's behind Monsanto and these things is something very, very sinister, and that is that, as I said, after 2012, we may find ourselves in a different kind of situation. And I've also located and discovered the fact that, in Sweden, in some of the other European countries of the world, they've been hoarding, just like in some sort of Noah's Ark type experiment, seeds, actual seeds of all the plants in the world, that these organizations have even approached Native American Indians in America in order to get the purest kind of maize, the purest kind of corn, and they paid for it. They've bought it. They've gone around and sequestered the DNA of different plants that grow in every country, these countries, from bananas to rare herbs, and they're storing it in these underground silos and these underground bases. And tracking this kind of information has showed me that obviously it's not just about then putting in place the GMO food, the manipulated food. It's a twofold thing in which somebody is sequestering all of the different life forms that exist on the planet, their DNA, because possibly that stuff is going to be no more. They're going to actually prevent it from us from using it. In other words, they will still have it. It will still be sequestered for scientific purposes and for archive purposes, but we're going to see some sort of either radical plague, just like, we're talking the bird flu and other things. And these are, again, not new. These plagues go way back into the times of the ancients. So the scenario that I'm looking at is, with all of this development of technology, with all of this sequestering of the organisms of the earth, with all of this looking into human DNA and replication and cloning and the whole concept of the biological study, and you can better believe that this stuff has some secret society tie-ins, because all the symbolism that these various companies use, and even some of these individuals, these doctors and scientists who are behind this whole biological study, they're using symbolism, Rebecca, that comes out of the world of the secret societies. They're barely covering it up. So could it be that tomorrow they're going to unleash some sort of plague that takes away all the normal crops and that devastates agriculture as we know it? We already know that topsoil is wearing out throughout the world. They're always screaming at us that it's hard to feed a lot of the mouths in the world. They keep putting that fear into us. And they want to monopolize this to such an extent that tomorrow, if some sort of virus was unleashed in which all of the world's, foodstuffs was destroyed, then one, they not only have the storage to say, we have the DNA to restart it again, but in order to restart it again, in the interim, you're going to take what we have here genetically, and you're going to work on those farms, you're going to work in this area, and you're going to eat what we tell you to eat. Just in very much the same way, if we had a martial law situation and the army came in for a number of reasons, wouldn't they demand that we all line up in their soup kitchens to have their vaccinations, and then to qualify for food, we'd have to be totally under control. They wouldn't even permit you to walk and run around in the streets. See, just for instance, say there was a great tsunami or some other natural disaster, the army don't allow you, they don't give you the right under martial law to just remain in your own home, you see, and to fend for yourself. So all of those survivalist, quote-unquote, people who think, oh, that won't bother me because I know how to go into the woods and live, or I live here in a remote part of Europe, I'll be able to, survive. You see, you don't understand. Under martial law, you will be shot down in the streets the moment that they put the curfew on. The situation with these sort of operations is that you don't have the freedom. You have to come into their compounds if you want the food and the care and the medication, and all of that kind of thing. And you know as well as I do, Rebecca, that 95% of people will be screaming for that type of protection and will easily line up to get it because they feel, I need that bowl of soup. I got to have my children taken care of. I'm afraid to be out here amongst all these lunatics who are running around with guns.
That's absolutely true. That being said, we do have to take a short break. We have a question in regards to the spear that we were just talking about. So don't go away, you guys. We're going to be right back. Don't go away. All right, welcome back. We are here with Michael Tsarion, And what a conversation we had in the first hour, and it proves to be just as interesting in this next hour, because Michael is still going to be with us for the rest of this hour. We do have, Michael, a couple of questions for you, if you're ready to take a few before we get back into some more conversations.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. This one came through my chat room, and they ask, surely by us becoming distrustful and skeptical to the point where we distrust a glass of water, surely we ourselves become both guilty of spreading and advocating fear, whilst also becoming a fear victim. If you would like to maybe address that.
Well, yeah, you see this again. This is a person who's talking not about fear, but paranoia. A lot of these words get confused. A lot of these terms get confused. What I'm talking about is not to be fearing everything, but to critically understand the fear. We're already in fear.
Right. We live it every day.
Right. We're already in stress. We're already being, cornered into a state of chronic super anxiety. My message is not to make that worse, is to start looking at the causes of these anxieties and these fears. So people like, the person who's just written that, I don't think have a faintest idea what I'm talking about or where I'm coming from. It's basically because they haven't, spent enough time to look into what we're doing. They're reacting from fear. They're reacting from fear because they're already in fear. And so everything new, right? It's like when you try to shine a light in somebody's face in the morning, they either strike out at that light, they tell you to take it away, or they climb under the covers to make it go away. So this is the inevitable reaction, and people who are into homeopathy know this, that as soon as you, put the real cure into effect, there's a sort of a toxic period first, and there's a toxic point where people have, toxic curve where they feel a little bit worse before they feel better. And that's the dangerous part, because at that moment people may give up. They may go, oh my God, I'm feeling a lot worse. This isn't working, and go back to the old system thinking that they're feeling better. And this is what allopathic doctors hope for, is that they hope that you won't go towards the holistic system, because that might make you feel a little bit worse before you feel a little bit better. So that's basically my answer to that, is that we're already in a state of fear and paranoia. And the salvation to that is what we've already been given by God, which is a critical ability, a tremendous sense of judgment, a good deal of suspicion, and basically what we're calling the human reason. We have to start using the human reason so that we can climb out of this emotional miasma that, we've been put in by the people around us. I'll add another point, and that is that anyone who does have a lot of problem with fear, anyone who's, has noticed, like your questioner there has probably noticed that there is a lot of fear around, there's a lot of fear in them, there's a lot of fear in other people, had better start examining how much your fear increases when you're watching the TV, when you're listening to all of that stuff coming across, and more so even when you're around other kinds of people. When you're around a kind of people who are leaking fear out of their chakras, or they're leaking fear out of their system, of course, by your care and concern for them, or by the fact that you work near them every day, you see, you've got to also look at, we have to understand that we live in a plasma of other people's energies when we're walking around. We're not just sovereign. We're not just independent. Unfortunately, we're walking around, and just like dust can get on us, you see, dust gets onto us, dust gets onto the things we own, so this kind of psychic dust also contaminates us if we're breathing it in too much. People are always screaming about secondhand smoke. My God, if they only knew on a psychic level what kind of secondhand gunk is you know what I mean?
That is, you know what? I absolutely love the fact you said that, because I do not have, and this is a true statement, I do not have obsessive compulsive disorder. However, whenever I'm out in public for too long of a period of time, the first thing I do is I can't wait to get somewhere to take a shower.
Yep.
You can just feel the junk, everybody's junk on you. I mean, it just is that way. It truly is.
I agree with you. I agree with you, and it's getting worse, and it's getting worse.
Yes.
And a lot of that is it's like a spectrum of its own. It starts with just normal daily junk, which is, okay, cool, we can't do without it, but it escalates all the way up to some pretty serious psychic toxicity,
yes,
which is very hard to get free from. You have to take showers. You do have to be concerned about it. You've got to be, getting into your center and making sure that you address this. But those people who have never done that or are not savvy like this, they're not aware of this, you see, maybe walking around unbelievably contaminated. I mean, way so. All their organs, all their glands, all their cells, all their thinking is basically not their own, is what I'm trying to say. And I've looked into this, and I'll be, doing more on this earlier when we talked about the different projects I'm involved in, you see. And you said something very smart, which was sometimes we have to do things in the right time. We're at a certain time now where this information comes out, and you hinted that, the work that I'm doing has found its timing. That's so true, because I am very concerned that I actually have to go light on some of the things that I've discovered and some of the things I'd like to put out. I have to very much meticulously organize the kinds of projects that I have, because the time is still not right for some of the download, that people still won't get. I'm going to wait, till next year or the year after or whatever. We plan this out. I plan this out because people are ready for a certain amount of stuff now, and I'm not stupid enough to know that they're not ready for the full picture yet. There's a lot that has to be delayed and be sensitive, to diagnose where people are at and so on. I'd love to get into some more information that I have, but, it's just not the right time yet. And one of these studies is this thing to do with fear, is this thing to do with anxiety. Mostly what I do now, I just keep it in the frame of, whenever I address these matters, I just keep it in the frame of people should become more savvy about what's coming over the television, what's coming over in the body politic, the kind of consciousness of your friends, you see, that might be contaminating you. And it's all right for them to be that way. You can't go around hardwiring somebody else. You can't tell the people on TV, the talking heads, to change. But what you can do is you can take responsibility for yourself and clean your own aura and consciousness on a daily basis, if not more than that, all of that junk that comes over. I mean, you have to clear it. You have to say, that's not me, that's them. You've got to make sure that you have boundaries up so this stuff does not perpetually contaminate you or your children, you and the people you care about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better. Absolutely. So I agree with everything that you've said there. We have, let's see.
Rebecca, one thing I've just found, if I could for a second, the John Taylor Gatto.
Oh, yeah.
People go onto YouTube and put in John Taylor Gatto, but sometimes he's J.T. Gatto. But I've just found that one of the videos that's excellent is people need to type in John Taylor Gatto - state-controlled consciousness. And then they'll hit this very, very good series of, talks that he did, their interviews, and they are just mind-boggling. So John Taylor Gatto - state-controlled consciousness, enter that into the YouTube, field, and you'll come up with John Taylor Gatto's work. Very, very important. His book is actually called, let me give you the name of his book as well. It's, oh my God, just give me 1 second here.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
I want to get the name of his actual book out, and here it is. It's, I want to make sure I get it right. It is called The Underground History of American Education.
Okay, the Underground History of American Education.
So if people even want to go to Amazon, you see, or just go to John Taylor Gatto's website, and they'll see this book. Very important for people to read and then to pass on to their, family, friends, because this book shows you the kind of, like we said, there's lots of different criminality from lower level, criminality and injustice, up to the huge level, and then there's just stuff in the middle. So there's all levels of this kind of thing. This is very, very important, man, for America to know about. Really got an insight into the kind of corruption in the education system that's basically mind-controlling children and dumbing them down, not educating them at all.
Well, I always said all it is about memory testing. How much can you memorize and then take a test on it, and then you move on to the next thing, memorize it, and take a test on it.
Exactly.
It really
go ahead with the next question.
Oh,
sure.
Okay, yeah. And I'm glad. I get really irate over the educational system. I just
me
really,
too.
I do. I get really irate, especially here. I mean, we've absolutely found valid, substantiated proof on some of the history. And of course, do they change the books? No, they don't. They just keep feeding the same junk to us over and over again, and not even to my grandchildren. It's crazy. Here is somebody that wrote in, and this guy's a regular. He IMs me all the time when we're on the air. This is Matt in Omaha, and he said, I see people's desire for money, property, and things outweighing our humanity and how we treat each other, animal life, and our environment. And he just wanted your take on all of that.
Well, again, it ties into what we're saying, that people who are sensitive, people that I refer to as the outsiders, they know what's going on. They don't have to be told that something crazy is going on in our world. They know it. People like, Matt know this. They don't have somebody else to come and say to them something's wrong. Unfortunately, a lot of the world, they do. They need to actually have you come to tell them, hey, don't you see these injustices? You walk around California most of the time, you'll meet people who have no idea that there's any type of injustice going on. They're just looking for their surfboard. They're just looking, for the next fashionable thing to come along to entertain them. So we're dealing with a mass audience who trust and believe everything that comes across the television. They have a censor to sort of block out anything quote-unquote negative. Not that it's negative, it's just this is part of reality as well, But they don't want to do that. And they want to leave the cleanup, and they want to leave the responsibility to other people.
Right.
It's like I was talking about what's coming down in the future with Monsanto and these people. These are just the first stages of a countdown to a mass global incarceration. But it's not going to be incarceration in holding centers, and it's not even going to be the military-style martial law, like I used as an analogy. I was talking earlier on about martial law as an analogy. I don't believe it's going to happen that way. I was just using it as an example, saying that, look, in a martial law situation, when people, they will line up for the bowl of soup and for the protection and for the vaccinations in a martial law situation, we're going to have to look at that happening. But it's going to happen partly by consent on a much higher global level in which the whole human race, which I believe is the real enemy, because, to the illumined ones, the ones who are the all-seeing eye sort of creatures at the top of the pyramid, these people are the ones whose agents have been hacking away at the sense of humanity and the sense of camaraderie and the sense of, community. I've addressed this. Matt may want to go on to my website, michaeltsarion.com, and check out an article I got there called Weapons of Mass Destruction Found. And in it, I cover this whole erosion, you see, of these human sensibilities that have been happening. But in the larger context, what I believe is coming down is the mass incarceration of people in a sort of a virtual reality situation. And food is one of the greatest controllers. There's always been a statement that mankind is about 3 meals away from revolution. And the government know this. The government know this very, very well. They've even seen it in situations when we've had rations and when Europe, for instance, had to endure the First and Second World Wars. They've seen it when they've had famines. They've seen it what happens when you deprive people of their foodstuffs, what will happen. They've done this in experiments. They understand this completely. And therefore they know that if you want to control the whole human race, you do it through the foodstuffs. Anyone who studied Zacharias Sitchin, anyone who knows what's been going on in ancient times, in the times of Sumeria and Babylon, know this also happened in the past. So it's an old methodology. Native American Indian lore has this embedded into it, this whole secret of the food and the genetics and the bioenergetics and the underground, silos in which there's a preservation of the human race during a time of cataclysm. So we also need to look at the fact that HAARP is active. We've got these satellites up there. What would happen if the whole world tomorrow, there was a crop failure throughout the world and another famine, a worldwide famine came, and then we are basically told, don't worry, Big Brother is going to come and save you. Hasn't it been great that we've been working on all this genetics, hybridized foodstuffs? You used to complain about it. Now you can get on your knees and bow to us with gratitude that we've been doing this because, hey, this great famine has now wiped out, some of the crops. And see, even an ecologist might argue that this could happen because the kind of saturation farming that we've been doing anyway is sending a red flag up to nature.
Yeah, and that happened here in the United States when our government came in and basically told the farmers what they could grow and what they couldn't grow and where they could grow it and where they couldn't grow it.
Now, that's right.
That was carefully planned.
It was carefully planned. So they've done these experiments to find out on the small and the medium scale what would happen. They absolutely know. And they also know that by the saturated cereal farming that they've done, that does in fact endanger the ecology. So I'm saying it could come naturally, but more likely it'll be they'll pretend it came naturally, some sort of plague, but it will be something that they have unleashed on a bacterial level that annihilates some of these crops that some of these countries, maybe even the Western countries, thrive on, and breaks down the entire, food distribution setup. So that suddenly they've got us now in this situation. But then they appear to come to our aid, saying that, hey, we've got these silos, we've got these GMO seeds, now you have to survive on this. So they basically have us, but then comes that's the carrot. What's the stick? The stick could be, and you have to be basically a compliant, non-violent, completely controllable, menial, before we think that you and your family are eligible for this kind of, food or whatever. There can be a set of, exactly. There can be a set of, just like they do in prison. You either own it or you don't get it. In any institution worth its salt, and certainly any punitive, draconian institution, you better believe it that you're going to have to own it. You're going to have to matriculate it before they send you to the hole and they promote other people above your head. So if the world is turned into this global village, which I prefer to call global prison, the food could be the issue. Now, say we even go one step further than that, and it's not just about that. They take away the real organic DNA. They've sequestered all of that. They create some sort of plague that affects the crops. They insert the GMO, saying, okay, luckily we've got this, people can survive. But what happens if at that point then they even want to bring us inside? Just like so many science fiction shows have actually been showing since way back in the 1960s, and even authors in a non-fiction sense, in a fictional sense, have written about this, that human beings, not all of them, but some of them, may be forced into underground silos to live, might be forced into enclosed cities to live, because of course if they say it's a plague or it's an infestation, they can easily say that the air is contaminated, and now we need to be, and there's evidence to show that the technology now exists to build these kinds of, bubbles, or these kinds of interior spaces in which they incarcerate the people. And the ones who get incarcerated into them are thinking that that's good for survival. They're going to be the brainwashed ones thinking, hey, no, this is needed, we've got to do this, our children are dying. And so they set up a situation in which they make the surface of the planet, to cut a long story short, this is what I'm basically saying, is that the very surface of the planet, the outdoors area of the planet, you see, is off limits. And we are now living perpetually in a controlled, super-lit, fluorescent, air-conditioned, utterly controlled environment. This is the brainchild of the Francis Bacons and of these certain kinds of humanists, and certainly people, coming out of the sort of a Bertrand Russell school.
Right.
This is the kind of mentality I'm not saying anything here that is too fictional. You only have to go and read the right kinds of works from the right kind of people in power to realize that this is something that has been on their minds for a long, long time, to bring about the perfect slave, the perfect product, the perfect anesthetized, dumbed down, but very functional individual. And my work, this goes back to the beginning of our show, what we were talking about, is that, okay, that's what they might do to us. But in the beginning I talked about that my emphasis is what is it that in human beings might want to go for that? That even when they try to sell us this, let's not just think that everybody will shrug it off and go, oh my God, no, this is horrible, this is monstrous, I'm not, for this. We have to wonder about the kinds of people that might be just eager enough to want to live in that kind of super sanitized, super controlled, super kind of medicated state. And this is what my work looks into. Is it human beings who are not dealing with their own inner homework, who are not connected to their soul, who are not really connected to anything, the spirit of humanity, who may be itching for Big Brother to bring them this kind of artificial type of lifestyle? This is another area that we have to factor in, and that's what the Architects of Control DVD looks at. It looks at the technologies that may be coming, you see. This series is going to do that. But in Program 1, we just look at more the psychology of the human being. What have people allowed in the past that's been so draconian? And what is it that they could be, inheriting in the future if they don't understand what it takes to, like Matt is saying, what's happened to the humanity, what's happened to the freedom, you see?
Yeah.
Well, is it really a case of somebody taking it away from us, or is it us giving it up?
That's the key question, and I think this is probably a good place, Michael, for us to take a break. We've got lots of questions, and I've got a couple of statements I'd like to make in regards to what you just said. So, gosh, you guys, don't go away. We've got a lot more with Michael Tsarion. See you in a minute. All right, welcome back. What a night we are having here with Michael Tsarion right here on Journeys with Rebecca. Welcome back, Michael.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Lots of good, interesting things going on in my chat box. It's been pretty interesting watching and listening and hearing the people back and forth. It's very, very interesting. So the one thing that I will address here for everyone is that we are here, you and I are here tonight together to simply present our own theories, our own ideas, our own thought processes, our own research, whatever the case may be. And as always, people can either research it on their own, you can agree, you can disagree. That's what makes us all individuals. That's our own human sovereignty, is to believe or not to believe, to trust or not to trust. There is no right or wrong here in regards to any of this. It's simply that you're presenting ideas and thoughts and your work that you've done for all these years, as well as many other people that have done similar, not identical, certainly, work and have presented all of this. One of the things that I wanted to comment, that being said, I'm going to move on now past all that, is the food sources. A great deal of information came out, I think, earlier part of this year. I'm not quite sure exactly when it was. One of the big names over here in the United States, obviously, was Bill Gates. And they built that vault up in Antarctica or someplace. I can't remember now.
Right.
And, of course, that's the storage of all the seeds and all of that.
There's another one in Sweden.
Yeah, and another one in Sweden. I heard about that. And actually, I just heard about that one fairly recently, believe it or not. Sometimes it just takes a lot of work just to garner all of the information that people share with you. I mean, literally, I can sit here at my desk for hours every day just researching the information that people share with me. It's been an amazing journey these last 6 years, by the way, that I've done this show, and it has changed in its direction, but always it is about sharing the information. And there's been a lot of people that have come into their own because of the guests that I have on, and you being no exception to that rule either. So, the world is absolutely, kind of gone off its axis. And just like I stated before, for people that wake up and go, gosh, something just feels totally wrong, it really is about connecting that. But you as an individual have to find out what is wrong, what about your picture doesn't fit. Because we weren't meant to be running around being unhappy and being in a state of anxiety. We are also biological beings that weren't meant to have artificial chemicals in our bodies. Our bodies have been, slowly been trained to accept these toxins so that we can survive. Because the one thing that the human body does have is it has a great deal of adaptability to its environment. And for the people out there that that take the pharmaceuticals, please look and see what's really in that pharmaceutical. What does it really do? The drinking water, the cloned beef, been a lot of talk on that. There's been no regulation on that. As a matter of fact, now they're saying that they don't even have to tell you that they're producing the cloned beef and you could be eating it. And interestingly enough, Michael, I had a lady on my show last year who was so disturbed by this cloned beef. She's an aura reader. She reads auras of everything, people's energy patterns, for those that don't know what that means. And she went through a whole field of cloned beef. And her statement to me, she begged to be on the show because she wanted to share the information. She said they have no aura. There's no aura to the beef, to the cows.
That's right.
There is no aura. So if there is no aura, there is no energy. So we are energetic beings. Yes, we have a biological body, but it does run off of energy. That's what we've been talking about, psychic energy. It is energy, whether we can't see air necessarily, but it's there. We breathe it. I mean, that's that's a fact.
Well, that's right. And this stuff feeds us. It nurtures us.
Yes.
And we have an age-old connection, you see, to the land. We have an age-old connection to the food we eat. All of this ritual has been stripped away. All of this connection to the flora and fauna and to the light and to the water supply, you see, has been completely whittled down until we don't even know. Children today don't even know, where things come from. They don't even realize that meat comes from a living animal, or they don't realize that, apples grow on trees, and et cetera, et cetera. So, you see, in a way, the government has sort of waited for this particular time so that everyone will be so dumbed down to such a low level of just common sense that they'll be perfectly malleable, and everything that I'm talking about, you see, is verifiable. It's in the actual records of these kinds of humanists and these social engineers. Nothing has been hidden from us. We present the information, and we cite, we go through and analyze the information that's been in these people's books. On my forum, if people go to my forum, just go to michaeltsarion.com, click through to the forum, and then go to the Mankind's Future page. You'll see a bunch of links I put up there, which emphasizes what I'm just saying. These are links directly to these humanists who are itching to build a global village, who are itching to strip us from our rights. And for those who won't conform, they have all of these things in place. They know that you can't do it through a gun to the head. That can only happen in small places like Northern Ireland or Haiti or some other kind of dictatorships. To control all of the people of the world, it's not possible. Not even with all the arms, with all of these kinds of belligerent strategies. It's not necessarily going to work, because you see that only, first of all, it doesn't work, and secondly, if you try that, the human race has a history of responding through rebellion. So the Big Brother's getting too much sophisticated for that. They know you can't put the troops on the streets, because the troops are human as well. And in many times when they've tried to do this throughout the world, the troops actually side with the people eventually. So it's too random. It's too difficult to control that kind of situation should it backfire in your face. So the kinds of strategies for controlling the human race are a little bit different. They don't mind still scaring you with the jackboot type of mentality. You see, that does a good thing. That's like the sheepdog that scares you. But it's not really the way that they're going to go. And see, as I said, as your previous caller, not Matt, but the one before that, who was talking about all the fear and what are we going to do about the fear, you see, you got to realize also that this is people who speak like that are out of touch with the kind of power that the human race has. They're in fear because that's the programming. Actually, man has a tremendous lot of power to change the way things are just by the dollars that you spend. Because look, let me make it very, very simple and in your face. Yeah, they may have a pharmaceutical leviathan out there. They may have a pharmaceutical monopoly. That when you turn on the TV, they're advertising junk food one minute, and the very next commercial is the kind of pharmaceuticals to make you recover from eating the junk food. This is what you see on TV now. It's just the junk food they're selling you, and then the medication because you're so sick of the food. So people can join the dots and see that this is happening. But ultimately, the power is with the people. You don't have to go and buy those, pharmaceuticals. You don't have to buy that medicine. You don't have to buy that stinking water. You don't have to buy that contaminated food. So they may present a plate for you, but you don't have to eat off of it. So instead of feeling the fear, I always tell my audience, to realize you have tremendous power, both in your what's left of your voting rights, but certainly on a civil level, you do have a lot of legal power, and you have it in your purse. You don't have to buy into this kind of stuff. I said in many of my talks, it's not about somebody selling you a lie. It's whether or not you're buying the lie. What has happened is they're traumatizing people so much that people feel that they need all of these panaceas and bromides and crutches, but as a matter of fact, they don't. All they got to do is go back to where they were once upon a time in humanity, where you deal with your emotions and you deal with your problems in a holistic and truthful and good way. And we are now created in a society, you see, in which it's almost taboo to speak about your emotions at work. You don't want to go to that level. They've dumbed us down to such a shallow degree that we just become clones of the kind of people that we see on TV. We don't deal with our emotions correctly. We don't read psychology books. We don't go and find out what's really going on. And so we are allowing ourselves to be placed in a state of higher anxiety and higher fear. What needs to take place is a spiritual awakening in which people, go back to the old ways where they deal with this kind of content in their beings without feeling, small or being belittled by it or feeling ashamed. You know what I mean? There's ways to go about it. There's ways to go back into nature. There's counselors. There's all sorts of things that you can do. You can study it instead of fear is a choice. So somebody could be disseminating this. Somebody could be disseminating all of this poison, but you still have the right not to be ingesting it. This is the key point here.
It's called choice, and I agree with that. I have one question that one of the people in the chat box has asked me twice to ask, which was, are there any silos located in Africa?
I don't know for sure. I haven't come across evidence. Remember, I'm still looking into this as I speak. As we continue researching the material for our DVD series. Remember, the first program is going to be out in a couple of weeks, or maybe next month. But you see, there's still 2 more in the series to come. We're constantly looking into this. So, and anything we find, we'll post up on our websites and forums. And of course, my sites are all open, you see, to have people, contribute. A lot of what I find out and a lot of what I know is from contributions from people all around the world. I know there's some very strange stuff going on in Australia. I believe that there's a lot going on in the areas of Afghanistan. One of the reasons why we're there, one of the reasons why we're in Turkey, in Iran, in Iraq, and also up into Azerbaijan and these places, is because of a lot of underground potential there. There's a lot of underground caves and underground spaces, you see, that can be used for both military and other situations. There's been lots of books written on the underground silos and underground caverns in America. We have links to that. You know, people can contact me for the books on that. They can go into Amazon and look up a book called Underground Tunnels and Bases. You know, there's been work on this, and they're right here. They're right in our backyard. You know, this kind of these caches, and of course, there's going to be in the outlying places of the world, like in northern Canada, Alaska, where the climate is good for preserving things, you see. In Iceland, there's been sort of investigations there that something strange is taking place. There's the buying up of land and all of this kind of technology. And so it's a developing situation, but when you start looking into a lot of what these people are saying, a lot of whistleblowers, a lot of new evidence, new information, it looks kind of alarming that they're looking to create, you know, a situation in which we start to live in a sort of a fabricated environment in which we're not even on the outside anymore. We're either incarcerated underground, or the whole human race, or those who are eligible. Don't forget, there's always this question of eligibility into these situations in which, you know, we're sealed off from the world as we know it today, and our foodstuffs is controlled, and it's a pretty much lockdown situation. And many people in the world are getting to the point where they find life so stressful, or because of crime, rising figures in rape, gangland warfare. You see, all the various things that are happening to cause fear are all orchestrated. The guns that are given to these, sort of gangs, the amount of drugs that these gangs can get hold of, which are being disseminated from military bases. There's a whole black ops project throughout the world to create unbelievable crime rates, unbelievable sense of anxiety, you see, so that when they hand down these projects, when they start signing it into law, and they push forward in this kind of thing, they're not going to be greeted only with people going, you must be crazy, we're not going to buy into this. By 2012, we may be in such a state of anxiety and such a fierce situation that we might ourselves, you see, accept all of this. This is how Big Brother works. Adolf Hitler was voted into power. All the worst tyrannies of the world are voted in. So we got to look to that as well and watch out that we are not so dumbed down that we sort of buy into this gig.
Well, and that being said, you know, my newest information is that they are at a rapid pace, are building the equivalent of 2 underground cities in the United States each year.
That's right.
Complete cities, everything anyone would need. And interestingly enough, Michael, years ago, I was doing some investigation with some people, and I got the strangest sensations, and I started tuning into it. And one of the things that I recognized was that all underneath my feet was I could hear trucks. I could hear trucks underground my feet. And so I kept following the vision, and I had seen a place where these trucks enter and exit, and there was all this building, and, you know, this has been many years ago. And then, you know, the visions just kept coming. I mean, I'd be in some of the strangest places, then all of a sudden it would be just like my attention would be drawn under the ground, and there would be all these things. And I was trying to tell people, I said, man, they're building a bunch of underground stuff. People, oh, no, they're not. I was like, oh, yes, they are. And so now here it is. And they're continuing to build it. It's all over. And again, it could be used very much like what you said, or it could be by invitation only.
That's right. And about 5 years ago, Robert Stack, the actor,
yes,
he was presented, I think it was called Mysteries of the Unexplained or something on A&E. I don't remember exactly the name of the actual show, but it was the famous investigative report show. It wasn't the one with Bill Curtis. It was the one that used to be on with Robert Stack.
Oh, yeah, what was the name of that? I can't even think of it. Yeah.
Right, well, he had an entire show. I mean, this thing is about an hour and a half at least, where it focused on people who had a problem with this continual buzzing and sort of a low-level humming that they kept hearing in their ears, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as the report continued, you found out that most of the people who had this sound lived in the country. They lived in farms that were out of the area, you know, and and these people were so perturbed by this, the people who suffered from this for years, you see, couldn't explain it. And they said it was louder at night and so forth and so on. And one person that they had interviewed, if I can remember correctly, did say that he felt that it was coming from underground.
Yep.
And they just left it at that, and they didn't follow up anymore with that. And then this guy, you know, created a website for other people who, you know, have this particular problem. So if you search the web, you know, for that, people might be able to find those websites. But this became a huge problem, and it's answered by exactly what you said. This is not some freak thing that's happening inside their brains or something that's happening. These are picked up by the human ear in these remote places where they stand out there under the stars, and yet they can hear this humming going on, this high-level machinery. And, of course, then the rebuttal is, oh, my goodness, it's just something you've contracted inside your own head. Well, of course you have, you know, because I can admit it. So, you know, people have got to research this, that huge drills, huge machinery, day and night, is going on and on and on while they create these underground silos, you know, so that even if somebody was to find out about it, they'd cover it up by saying, well, this is for military purposes.
Yeah, everything is about non-disclosure. That being said, unfortunately, we got to take a little short break. When we come back, though, I do have a couple quick questions for you that came up. And you guys stay with us. We're going to be right back with more of Michael Tsarion. Don't go away. All right, welcome back. We're here with Michael Tsarion. Michael, my goodness, we have just blown through almost of this whole 2 hours. I do have two quick questions. We only got about 8 minutes left of the show tonight. Just went by way too fast, way too fast. The first question was about chemtrails. And the second thing is about if you can give a brief synopsis of what you think this financial bailout is really all about over here in the States.
Well, yeah, the chemtrails, was that the first question? Yeah,
the chemtrails. I actually took a photograph of some the other day that was the most oddest ones I've ever seen. Very strange.
That's right. We've been looking into that. I definitely think there's something to it. It's an ongoing study. I think people have to be very, very aware of this. And also, you see, chemtrails are also found way out to sea. You know, they don't only happen over cities and over farmland. They're also happening over the oceans. So it's not just about simply people control. I mean, okay, the ones that I've seen that are over the oceans may be because the winds are going to eventually, you know, blow it towards populated areas. That could be happening. But they also happen, you know, people have told me that even in movies of 1950, when you're sometimes watching a movie that's maybe even a black and white movie in the 1950s, and they show a shot of the sky, people claim to have seen chemtrails even then being done. So, you know, it could be an old story here. And those people, you know, without the control of the human race is a very old story.
Yeah.
And so this is just one of the ways that it can be done. A lot of people argue against that because they say, well, then even they, quote unquote, their children would be affected. But don't forget that these people could be homeopathically, you know, fortified. They could be fortified with homeopathic medicines that the rest of us we don't even know anything about. So it's an open question there. What was the other point?
The other one was about the financial bailout here in the United States. What do you...
Yeah, well, this is, again, nothing new. You see, people are looking at this kind of thing as if it's something new. It's not. America has been under a financial attack now for, you know, generations. This is just one of many. Remember, a lot of these banks and these credit unions are criminal organizations. They're not operating, you know, legally anyway. So, of course, the government is going to have to come in and bail them out when suddenly their dirty laundry's shown up. And don't forget that what is happening right now is also there's the death of the middle class.
Yes.
And a lot of these banks and a lot of these institutions and a lot of these businesses, just like it was back in 1939 with the Depression, you know, sometimes the ladder is pulled up so that lots and lots of people are left impoverished. This is the kind of war that's going on against the American people. It happened at the Great Depression when the Heartland people, the Caucasian, Scots-Irish people and Germanic peoples who had built America were eviscerated and annihilated. Their businesses were closed. Their farms were seized. I mean, people can't even imagine the absolute tyranny and despicable criminality of those times in which the federal government just came in and openly seized the land and seized, these companies of these families that have built America. And basically, I always describe that as a phase one of America that closed. And now we're doing it again. This is not the first. I mean, this particular crisis is only the tip of the iceberg. It's going to continue until finally people are so scared, the dollar is so weak, that the government can turn around and say, well, we need the Amero. We need a different kind of currency to come here because the dollar is not stable against the currencies of other countries anymore. And then also, what people have to really understand, and I hope that those who've read up on the creation of the federal government, those listeners who are familiar with the work of Eustace Mullins and G. Edward Griffin, and people who've shown that the entire federal system, including the entire economy of America, is based on funny money. It doesn't even exist anyway. It is a thing that is printed for a few dollars, a few pence, a few dimes in the federal setup, and then this money is circulated. In fact, we're not even talking about money as paper money anymore. Most of the money in the country, in the economy, is merely digital entries inside the computer.
Absolutely.
So when people are running around with their hair on fire talking about recession and, oh my God, economy's flat on its face, wait a minute. Haven't you heard that from 1909 or 1911, the rise of the Federal Reserve, there has been nothing backing any of the currency, and then the subsequent destruction of the heavy industry in America has made sure that there's not a real backing of... There is no economy. There's no real economy at all. There's only this faux economy of this fractional banking system, and to cover up any other losses, all the Federal Reserve has to do is add a few zeros on a computer screen and solve all the money problems. People run around with their hair on fire talking about national debt. What do you mean national debt? That's just a computer entry.
Yeah. And for those that would like to, really look into that, there's many sources for really how all of this started. Like you said, when the Federal Reserve and all of that came up. We're down to just a couple of minutes here, Michael. We could just go on and on, as it was the last time you were on as well. Please tell everyone about the DVDs, how they can get hold of it when they do come out. And obviously, I would love to have you back on again before the end of this year to talk with you again after the DVDs come out. That would be just awesome.
Sure, we'll do that. To find out everything, you just need to go to michaeltsarion.com, or you can just go architectsofcontrol.com. But I would always have people come to the Michael Tsarion website because that's the portal site to all the other sites. If they go to the forum, the MSAR forum, and go to the page called War on You, they'll find all the links to everything we've been talking about today. So again, we don't say anything that is not sourced and referenced. They can email me, or they can just go onto the forum and check out on the War on You page all the various types of links that deal with all of this. I just sent you by Skype the name of that book we were talking about.
Yes.
Underground Tunnels and Bases by Robert Stauber.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, again, it's all documented, and I think that by late October into November, both these DVDs we were discussing on the program will be finished, and they'll be out.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And as always, it has been my honor and pleasure to have you on here tonight, Michael, and I look forward to those DVDs, and again, look forward to having you back on before the end of this year. Obviously, if our schedules permit each other to do such a thing. And
certainly.
I thank you so much for being with us tonight. I truly